Now, the next millionaire skill will save you a lot of money and also really increase the quality of your life along the way. And that's actually getting a really good tailor. Now, once again, this may be one of those skills where you're kind of scratching your head and going, man, why have you included this? And it's for a simple reason. Once people start making money, I see people waste so much money on expensive clothes, designer brands, this, that, when instead all you had to do was go to, Uniqlo or Muji or like one of these really sort of high quality brands with, no graphics or anything like that. Take an item from there, go take it to your tailor, and depending on the item, it'll cost you anywhere from $20 to $40 per item. As I said, you don't need to go to the most expensive tailors, and you will look like $1 million rather than wasting all this money on brands. So clothes are such a waste of money, but at the end of the day, fashion is a big part of our life. And by the way, this is coming from someone who doesn't wear items that are cheaper than $500. I mean, even just a simple white cotton tee like this for me is $500. Damn. Most of the time, one of my outfits will cost anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 between the shoes, the jeans, the shirt or sweater and jacket, and there's not a single brand in sight. I really like very high-end brands, and I like really good quality and finishing rather than, just your designer stuff. Now, I know that is ridiculous, but, in my position with the over 8-figure investment portfolio and a business that makes millions a year, I really like fashion, and I really don't like labels or brands. I like to be more under the radar with what I wear, but that's an area of life that I still like to spend a lot of money in. So as I said, this is coming from someone who spends a lot of money on their wardrobe, and I'm even telling you it's so unnecessary. Back in the day, I used to go to some of these brands like Uniqlo, Muji, or I'd even go to outlet stores of some of the brands that I liked. Brands Vegan, Voltaire, Sandra, which are a little bit more on the pricier side, but if you go to outlet stores, you get them very cheap. Or I used to even go to secondhand stores, especially when I lived in London. There were some really good secondhand stores that had very nice brands. It's just they've been worn before. And I would take all this cheap or at least relatively inexpensive clothing, and I would take it to my tailor, and I would look way better than the people who spent 10 times as much as I did, but they didn't bother to get their stuff altered or tailored. And as I said, I was doing that stuff, 2-3 years ago when I'd already made millions of dollars. So as I said, the reason I include this in is because it really pains me to see people who are on their way to making their first $1 million. And that's a very important point in your life. And they're wasting money on designer brands and this and that. So I could have called this skill like, hey, just don't spend money on designer brands. But as I said, get a tailor and you're going to look way better than the people who are spending 10 times as much as you in any case.